Welcome to IP Goes Pop, your source for exploring the interface between intellectual property and pop culture. The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Volpe Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com. This program should not be considered legal advice. Please consult an attorney for your specific situation. And now your hosts, intellectual property attorneys, Michael Snyder and Joseph Gushue.
Greetings and cheers, listeners. This week on IP Goes Pop, the theme is Who's Laughing Now? It is the IP of comedy and whether there is any IP of comedy. And if so, how does that work? And we're going to dive into different issues in the comedy world. Let me bring in our co-host, who is always here with us with his finger on the pulse of pop culture at all times, Joe Gushue. Joe, welcome. Joe, fellow shareholder at Volpe Koenig. Thanks for joining again.
Hi, Mike. Great to be back and getting into another topic with you.
And we have a very special guest. So special, this is actually the first episode of IP Goes Pop. And years from now, we'll look back on this and say, this was our first outside guest. He is an alum of Volpe Koenig, but now he is senior corporate counsel for experiences and devices at Microsoft Corporation. You may have heard of them. We're bringing in this week our first guest ever, Aneesh Mehta. Aneesh, welcome.
Thank you. And I'm honored to be the first outsider invited in.
Well, you're kind of an insider who went out and is back again. I like to think of it that way. Another thing, we are huge fans of both experiences and devices. So you're kind of the perfect guest for IP Goes Pop. And by the way, here's another, we're breaking all the IP Goes Pop rules this episode, because usually when we set the table, Joe and I will set the table and bring in the guest, but we actually need Aneesh to set the table here. And it's actually a small wobbly table because it has to do with the kind of table you would have at a comedy club. So Joe, Aneesh, and I have a history of being huge comedy fans and kind of alternative comedy fans, but we actually went to multiple comedy shows, I think all at the Helium Comedy Club in Philadelphia. Who were some of the people, if you two remember? I remember them, some very vividly, but who did we get to see? And I believe we saw almost everyone at the absolute top of their game.
I think one time I went and it was Rob Riggle, and I think I went with my wife, and Joe happened to be there. We didn't go together at the time.
Yes.
And I got called out for eating ranch dressing by Rob.
And this was such a good comedy club to go to because it's a very intimate setting in Philadelphia. And we saw a number of these performers right before they hit it super big and were outsized for this particular audience. So it's so small that Aneesh was called out for eating his ranch dressing at it. And another time we went there, I remember seeing Norm Macdonald in a very intimate setting like this.
Norm Macdonald killed in a way that I think only someone as famous as an SNL player could kill. I think people were already kind of predisposed and knew him. He's very famous, right, for a comedian. So he absolutely killed. I know we saw Bill Burr.
Oh, yes.
And he had not yet made that massive leap to the next tier and all of the specials that you see now. But that was pretty amazing to see him when he did. And he absolutely destroyed Philadelphia from a sports perspective, if you remember.
I think that was his first time back since like the famous clip he had on YouTube that like went viral. Like that was him performing in Camden, I think in the Tweeter Center.
It was at it was an Opie and Anthony event he was performing at where he did the big takedown. It was the Virus Tour.
And I remember when we were there that he said something like, "Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of the Red Sox," and people are booing. He's like, "What? Like, were you mad about some interleague game? What? You're the Phillies fans. Why do you care?" Yeah, and I mean, I guess he's gone on. He's been in Breaking Bad, now in The Mandalorian, so he's had quite a career since those days.
And I would like to think some of that is because of the support we gave him at a small comedy club in Philly, but I don't think it's related. Did we see Dave Attell
Yes, we did see David Tell, and he's an interesting character with things. And I think Aneesh has run into him a couple times at different comedy clubs.
I have. Also, I think we saw Kevin Nealon. I don't know if you guys went to that one.
Yeah, I did see Kevin Nealon when he was in town. He's also frequently in Atlantic City, so he does the SNL alum tour through our area quite a bit.
I think he's great. And Anish, you had an event that you sponsored with Mike Kaplan, who I thought was fantastic. Very, very kind of cerebral. A lot of language based comedy. Did really well.
Yeah. That was like the Philly Bar Wild D event. I remember we had to go and like tell them like, please make it family friendly just in case. Like it's a charity event.
I wonder if that message got to the middle comic that day, because I remember that the middle.
Yeah, not.
Oh, he probably heard it and it's like, okay, I really got to step this up and make it much worse than I was going to do. Comics don't like taking direction, I imagine.
Joe, did we also had like the Aziz Ansari show in Atlantic City once? Did you get the same one?
I did not go to that one, but you saw him when he was coming around there in Atlantic City.
He came there, and I was like, he was good, but the guy who opened for him, we were like, wow, who's that? And it was Gerard Carmichael who ended up then hitting it quite big after that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes the opening acts, like I saw Amy Schumer at Helium when she was opening for, I think, Louis C.K. at the time. Again, both before they hit it real big and before Louis had his show on FX, and then everything that sort of followed from there. And so sometimes the opening acts actually like became just massive stars too at some of these shows we were going to.
Yeah, ironically, two of those folks are subjects of this discussion, right? In IP.
Yeah, we'll be bringing them up a little bit later.
Wow, it's like you're working on your segues when we're not doing this, but I think that sets the stage really well, because we have three students, if you will, of comedy, and we shared some comedy experience. Now, when you're talking about comedians being original, I want to put to the side just basically their performance style. So on the one hand, we have kind of the performance style. You have, classics like the Rodney Dangerfield and his kind of shuffling and, loosening his tie and different kind of things. You have Seinfeld, who now everyone imitates. You have other, there was Sam Kinison, who would just with his yelling and, on and different kind of stylistic. But as far as content goes, there's really a limited number of themes that you could talk about. So if we're all talking about the same types of themes and you do a skit about it or a bit or a chunk, as they say in the business, what can you protect? Because I've heard many different comedians do, something about, let's say, airplanes or the flying experience. Of course, entire careers are built talking about relationships. And Jim Gaffigan can talk about food for an hour and to great effect. Pretty amazing in person too. Then, of course, when comedians get married, they're going to talk about their kids and they're going to talk about their pets. I actually saw David Cross say, I always swore I would never be one of those comedians that talks about their pets. Here's 10 minutes about my dog. So I guess in the IP world, we have this doctrine called scenes of fair, SCENES, the word A and FAIRE. And this basically says that you can't protect stock characters or settings or common themes or tropes as long as you do something original with it or something different. Then it wouldn't be copyright infringement. So I just want to go, a couple cases. One time the filmmakers for Raiders of the Lost Ark got sued, and someone said, "Oh, I wrote a short story where there was gold in a cave and an idol, and they had to escape." And they said, "Well, those things could be in any kind of adventure type of movie or police station." So, for example, I'll ask Joe and Aneesh just to rattle off top of your head, what kind of tropes would you see in kind of a police squad type show?
Oh, the doesn't get along with the boss, right? The unsympathetic boss and the off the handle police officer who's really a hero.
Yeah.
I think Rainier was Wolfcastle, basically, right?
The guy who is or Scoey 2 days from retirement.
Oh yeah, it's his last job, his last week. things not going his way and him not making it to that retirement.
I mean, the Last Action Hero character like nails it, right? He's all of those tropes, like, and it's mocking it, right? Like, but they all still work. They still over and over again. Every show has that same sort of element.
So if you were going in to pitch a police drama, you would need all those things. Or in a courtroom drama, you would usually need maybe the judge who is very stern but will allow it, just to a certain extent. Like, watch yourself. I'll allow it, but watch yourself. That's actually a Mulaney bit. But you need all these stock things. So let's talk a little bit about joke stealing. And I just want to talk in general before we started to do some research for the podcast. I'll ask Aneesh, had you, in addition to the people we're going to talk about, had you ever heard or kind of or read about any comics who were, and again, we're not, disclaimer, we're not giving legal advice. If you need any legal advice, please seek out an attorney. That's our disclaimer. And also, we're not judging here. We're just saying, what has been represented perhaps in the news or things. But have you ever heard or seen stories about certain comedians, especially even very famous ones, where people say that or accuse them, of taking jokes or ideas?
Yeah, I mean, the most famous one, and which you guys teed up, was the Dane Cook one, right? Like, I mean, I think he was the hottest comedian there was, right? Like, he had all kinds of like HBO specials going on. Everybody knew he was. And there was immediately, like, even before like the joke stealing thing came up, there was like a backlash. And then suddenly on the tail of that, the sort of allegations that he stole jokes followed.
Yeah, it's like whenever a comic makes it super big, comics are very, very mad at that comic that makes it big. Because again, all of them are just competing. They're in the clubs together at the same time. They're paying their dues. And when someone sort of breaks out of that, there's a little bit of resentment, I think, to an extent. And then just in this sort of area of art or performing, these comics are constantly watching the other comics do their bits. So it's very easy for someone to perhaps subconsciously pick up a performing mannerism or even just an idea from something that they see at these clubs from spending hours and hours and hours in them and just hearing stuff. So you can see how people can think that they may be getting some of their even performing style or concepts for their jokes stolen. But yeah, the Dane Cook and Louis C.K. one was definitely big and had gone on for a number of years through Dane Cook's big rise to fame and then almost sort of like flaming out to an extent. But then it even made it to in the Louis C.K. Show he had on FX. The two of them actually got together in a scene and talked about the whole experience. And it didn't really feel like acting. It felt like, or felt like a script. They were actually just hashing out what they saw about that whole situation with each other.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about that scene, he's like, okay, thanks, Louis. You said it here, but it's in private. Could you post it on the internet or something? There's a little meta commentary of it being on the show.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It was, I thought they handled it really brilliantly, actually, by, saying that you see and do so much and you have kind of so much content that you're doing, and it got pulled into that essentially. But I remember the bit in particular was about the naming, naming of kids with like an odd name or like naming them after a transformer. And it seemed very close. But again, was it copyright infringement? There was a case where a comedian or comedic writer accused the Conan O'Brien team, which, by the way, does not strike me as a team that needs to steal jokes or would steal jokes in any stretch of the imagination. I think you have a room full of very high-end professional comedy writers who've been doing it their whole lives pretty much. And the joke was about the shutting down the University of Alabama Birmingham football program, and then saying a professional football team said something like, oh, wait, you can do that, because they were very bad, right? So that's the joke. So they did a similar joke, and he actually sued over the single joke. It never got to court. They settled out of court. What do you think about that kind of rising to the level of a United States District Court federal case over the one joke that goes into a monologue?
I mean, if you think about like the monologues that are going on at like Conan or into the late night, they're super topical, right? Like they're meant to be something that's reflecting in the news that day. And so you've already sort of short-circuited what subset of like topics you might be talking about. You know, Conan O'Brien, how he chose, UAB as a school, which is, pretty small program, but why that would make it, I don't know. But on the other hand, like, I think certainly there's times where you want to make a funny comment on Facebook or Twitter or any kind of social media, and you go to type something, it's like, oh my gosh, like 300 people have made the same comment already, right? Like we're all trying to build off of some common experience, and there's only so many ways we can go, right? And so it's kind of amazing that this single joke made it that far. And what I didn't look into the what the damages requested was. It would have been interesting. Like, what's the value of one joke?
Well, they actually did settle it out of court, and it obviously had to be enough to satisfy the writer. I always wondered if it was just for the press, because if they were not someone who had any aspirations to kind of work in the Conan O'Brien sphere or circle, this would certainly put you on the map. I guess any publicity is good publicity type of thing. I wondered if that was part of it, because first of all, it's not, I mean, it's not that groundbreaking of a joke, and it also was very topical. How often are you going to tell the joke from 2014 about a college football program? Well, Aneesh, I know you might remember this really. I mean, you follow college football really carefully, but I think it might have passed from the public consciousness pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, like Anish makes a great point about everything like that. Like these shows, they're giving these monologues every night. You go through the headlines, you sort of have a very narrow scope of what your jokes are going to be about. And so there's definitely going to be some commonalities between what jokes are made just by nature of it just being such a small subset of things to talk about.
So I remember one night, it basically happens every year that McDonald's re-releases the McRib. And then every late night talk show does at least one joke in the monologue on the McRib. And I saw kind of a mixtape on YouTube of all those different jokes. And again, they were all a little bit different, but you really couldn't say, hey, I own, the McRib joke, or I own the McRib bit. It can't work that way because of those commonalities, that Anish brought up. I think people also pick up on, let's say, when there's a comedian that has certain mannerisms and it's copied. But let's go back to, I think this is a good example. Let's go back to this example, and we're going to try to post the links in the show notes to the different videos that show this. So one of the controversies was Bill Hicks, a very edgy, free form type of comic at the time. He really, I think he was one of the earlier, let's say, alt comics who just would kind of tell a story rather than a punchline and a joke and a punchline. And then Dennis Leary, now they both, and by the way, I did not know, toured together, friends coming up through the clubs. Leary really admired him. And they both had a large chunk on smoking and how they really would keep smoking and we're not going to stop smoking. And the question is, is it copied? Is it copying just the scenes of fare? In the IP world, was there really something there, or can you be two different comedians who both love smoking? I know it's kind of odd to talk about now, but who both really enjoy smoke. By the way, Leary doesn't even smoke anymore, I think, because I saw him live.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he made his whole comic career about smoking too, which is
yeah, right. So I'm saying, was it really a knockoff, or can people do the same topic?
I mean, again, like, it's probably, younger folks find it kind of weird to think about, but that was a super topical thing in those days, right? The tobacco litigation was still going on. Like, until that point, like, airplanes used to let you smoke in the seat. People would be smoking everywhere. And like, things had just started changing, right? Like the public perception around it was going very different. And so it was like a topical thing at that time. Now, watching both of those sets, something seemed pretty close, right, in terms of how it was phrased. Leary has his own a little bit angrier delivery, but it wasn't something that was like some obscure thing of like woodworking. It was something that was very much talked about at that time.
I've listened to them back to back, and I really think that although the topic is the same, and again, I can't believe the topic was I love smoking, but it was. But they do it, I think, in a different way, and certainly a different delivery. I think Bill Hicks was kind of very wry and sarcastic, and never raised his voice. And Leary, when he was first starting, was like a maniac in his delivery. I was surprised actually there even was a controversy. I know people love controversy and love to invent controversy, but we talked about the Louis C.K. Dane Cook, which I thought was really interesting. Let's talk about one that a lot of people know about. Can someone tell the story of how we end up? I don't know if it was the Comedy Store, Comedy Cellar. I know it was L.A. How did Joe Rogan end up on stage with Carlos Mencia, and what happened?
I mean, just to set the stage, like at the time, Joe Rogan is not the Joe Rogan podcast monster that he is right now. He's in LA. He's the Fear Factor host, basically. And he goes to the Comedy Store. That's where his home was for practicing his stand up before he would go out on tour. I think he's calling events for the UFC, but it's before.
Did he have that bit part on news? He was on news radio too, right? He was one of the reporters as well.
Yeah, news. Yep.
This is after news radio. And by the way, Joe, you make a really good point. He was a working comic at the time, but all I knew was his first or second comedy CD that was out at the time. So he had not made the big jump that was to come yet. So he was just another club comic, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he's Fear Factor. So, he's found some success, but he's nowhere near the person that he is now on the scene. And then you have Carlos Mencia, who at the time had sort of burst out on the scene, probably from like the same sort of circuit area thing. But he, like most comics, made the leap into television. He got a deal with Comedy Central and had a show, Mind of Mencia, which was very popular. And as he started getting some more popularity, Carlos Mencia, Joe Rogan wanted to call him out on Carlos Mencia stealing some of his stand-up from other comics. And it got to such a point that there was a confrontation that they had that was recorded on stage at the Comedy Store in LA there.
And where was the security at the Comedy Store? That was like, it was almost uncomfortable, like how close they're standing and yelling at each other.
Oh yeah.
Well, that was my first question. And he did invite him up, I guess, with the confidence of, I mean, the comedians have to deal with hecklers. And I guess it was almost like treating him almost like a heckler. But I know people go to actually, I think we saw it one time. Did we see Patrice? Did any of us go to see Patrice together?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was going to mention him earlier. I mean, he was an unbelievable stand-up. Yes. Patrice O'Neal.
Just so the listeners know, Patrice O'Neal, RIP, just phenomenal, would sit on a stool. He's a very tall guy, would sit on a stool and just look around the audience and just kind of talk. And he was very off the cuff. Sorry about this tangent, but there were people who thought they could heckle him. He turned the whole show on them. They had no choice but to leave. I mean, they were driven out of the actual theater. So you do not go up against a professional. It's just like you wouldn't go into court against a professional attorney with your stack of legal pad notes. You're probably not going to do that well. So anyway, Joe, go on with the Joe Rogan, Carlos Mencia, what it became.
Oh, so yeah, it was sort of, it built up after a little bit. Joe Rogan had, I think, wrote a post about Mencia being plagiarizing different jokes from comics like George Lopez. And it ultimately got to a point where Rogan and Mencia were talking on stage at the Comedy Store, and the video was recorded of this sort of confrontation, and it just blew up on the internet, like a very, a viral video. Everyone saw it. And the fallout of this was basically Carlos Mencia's Comedy Central show disappearing. Like it very much harmed his professional career as a result of this.
Right. And again, we don't know, no one here, and maybe the comedians involved know the truth. I have no idea whether he ever stole, just sitting here today and even watching the video. Aneesh, what was I know you've seen the video. What was your take on the actual video of the confrontation?
I mean, I think the tough thing was his responses were just so bad and out of place that like he just continued. Like he started with the premise that the crowd was on his side, so he could just call the guy whatever he wants, like name and Joe Rogan whatever name, and he's gonna go away, and the crowd's gonna boo him. But like it didn't work that way, and then slowly, like Rogan seemed to have some receipts there, right? And he had some stories, and he was naming names. And then eventually, like, he kept on trying to, get the crowd against him. And it just didn't happen. And then he started getting really bad about like how his responses were. And I think that's sort of what probably killed him more than anything. He could have maybe played it cool and just had it go away. But like, it was like, I don't know. I guess you'd say the responses were not PC by modern terms.
Aneesh, you brought up the receipts thing. And it also, speaking of the practice of law, when Joe Rogan got on that stage, his evidence, he was as prepared as I've seen someone argue to the Supreme Court. He had every piece of it. He had all he really needed was a whiteboard, I think, to write it. And by the way, I don't know if he woke up that day and say, I am going to take away this guy's career, but I think that's where it happened. And again, not knowing the truth about any of this, it really was, if you want to talk about the comedian or comic writer who sued the Conan O'Brien show, trying to get some kind of result or notoriety versus what Joe Rogan did in the Comedy Store or Cellar, I keep forgetting, that night. I mean, talk about the court of public opinion. That was worse than any lawsuit that any group of comics could have ever brought, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we don't know if it was true, but the conviction in which he said it was true. He said, like, you stole this guy's line. I never seen his act. He toured with you, opened with you. No, he didn't. Yes, he did in this city. And you're like, right. Oof, the optics don't look good there.
I mean, Mike, you bring up the good point. It's like we're talking about there's only so many legal remedies you have with something like this. It's almost like doing this is how you can sort of defend yourself as a comic, oddly. And that's almost why we have this situation.
And only because this is a comedy podcast and we're talking about receipts, I gotta say the favorite comedian that I never got to see, unfortunately, had a great joke about receipts is Mitch Hedberg about getting the donut and then like, you want a receipt? He's like, I don't need pen and paper for this transaction. How about I just give you money, you give me the donut?
But Aneesh, you are the one who introduced me to Hedberg, and I want to go back to the kind of joke fights too, but real quickly on the Hedberg thing. So he was, rapid fire one-liners, right? No setup, just boom. And I think there are a few like that. I know that Dimitri Martin, he's another one who just rattles off. I have no idea how they have that much material. And, in the copyright world, you really can't copyright short slogans or sayings. I feel like jokes like that, you probably could copyright, but they might be considered too short or perhaps, not enough original content. So it's very hard to protect that much of your act. Let's say if somebody took one or two, I think you would feel bad and you would definitely feel burned and hurt, I guess. But it would be hard unless somebody kind of wholesale stole an act, which I have seen videos online of someone doing the entire Patton Oswalt bit, beginning to end, same inflection. I don't know if you guys ever caught that. It's a while ago now. Back to kind of delivery. I know the first time that I heard Amy Schumer, it was definitely reminiscent of another comic where she will tell a joke and kind of set it up, and then at the end have this kind of trailing off part at the end that was actually where all the funny stuff was. And it wasn't until I saw the side-by-side comparison with Wendy Liebman, a previous comic, that I really put it together. And when you look at it now, they are very close. I don't know if you guys got a chance to.
Yeah, I mean, I used to see her on I think I saw her on the MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour, which was, I think, like one of the greatest shows ever in the 90s. And yeah, like I'd never noticed that until I watched that video you sent of the side-by-side. And I was like, oh yeah, that's absolutely. And that was, I mean, that was essentially Wendy Liebman's whole shtick, right? Like that was her everyday shtick. I think Amy Schumer has a little bit more that she does. It's not always that, but like those bits were certainly very reminiscent.
I agree. When she did it in that style, it really felt like it was a tribute almost, because there is really only that one style. But some of the, I mean, if you go back now and you brought up those specials they used to have, there's this very kind of classic era of 90s comedy where you look back now, and to me, they are all Seinfeld. Every single person is Seinfeld.
They saw how popular he got. Yeah. That's I completely agree. And then the thing is, with comedy too, a lot of comics will try to not watch other people perform so they don't pick up any of their mannerisms subconsciously, which you could see perhaps it doesn't even, you don't even mean to take it up, but it just influences you. And that's sort of like, if you become super popular like that, it's like, all right, the people like this stuff. And then you just sort of tend to tailor yourself towards, what's in the mainstream at the time.
Yeah, part of it I think is also dependent on the relationship between the comics, right? I don't know if you guys ever saw Jerry Seinfeld, comedian, the movie he came out with, I think in the like late 90s.
Are you going to talk about the intro, which I love?
No, I was like more like it was mind blowing to see like he would do a set and then he would go off set and it was like Colin Quinn and Mario Joyner and everybody just like,
oh yes, I'm sorry, that one, yes,
critiquing and then like telling me like, oh yeah, the way if you twisted this joke a little bit different, it would work this way. And I was like, wow, is that how it happens?
Yeah, it's like how the sausage is made.
So that was comedian where they followed Seinfeld as the kind of superstar and then another comedian who was trying to make it. But you're right. They would sit around at the deli or the diner afterwards and just talk specific jokes and a specific word. And I remember Chris Rock was there, and it was that was a different. I was thinking of the Seinfeld farewell special, where in the beginning he was retiring all his jokes, and in the beginning they had all the comedians. I don't know if you guys remember, but he had a pile of jokes like on little slips of paper, and someone got caught stealing one, and he's like, "What are you doing?" in Seinfeld way, and he's like, "I don't have anything on airplanes right now." He's like, "Just take it," like in like kind of classic Seinfeld way. But I do think, the very distinct ones. And then again, this is where, performance is protected by copyright, but you can't just have the way you say a thing. There were very unique comics who obviously could not be, you really couldn't crib from them. And all of those emerged as the more distinctive ones. But in the 90s style, did you ever notice this? You ever notice that? We don't see too many of them unless they were the cream of the crop.
Yeah, I mean, you can't steal a distinctive style, but like, I mean, if you think of like, there's definitely the class of like the anger comics, right? Like Sam Kinison being the earliest one I remember, really, right? But like Lewis Black now is not as angry, not as yelling, but it's part of his shtick, right? Like I will yell, and it's a little bit funnier because he's yelling.
Yeah, it's fun. A great Sam Kinison story. He was at one of these clubs, and Rodney Dangerfield was the headliner, and he was in the back watching Kinison, very young. And Kinison, this is before he hit big. He did the screaming and he cleared the place out. And Dangerfield went up. He goes, "Guess you're going to do it the hard way." And he told him, if that's you, don't change your act. You are unique. Don't change it. Where every single manager told Kinison, stop yelling, which I think, at the end of the day, he probably was right.
Going back to you were talking about like the style, can't copy the style, can't do it. I mean, I think part of it is like the style is the comedy in a lot of cases, right? Like it's the really good comedians, like we saw Norm, right? They can actually just stop, not say something, and look at you at the right time because their sort of delivery that it makes it funny and it works, right? And so then like, are the words more important at a certain point, or is it the style?
That does remind me of what I wanted to bring up. Those are the storyteller comics, which is Patrice sat down on that stool and kind of looked around. It didn't seem that he had any kind of set material. And then Patton Oswalt has segued into these longer stories with kind of a moral at the end. I think David Cross does a similar thing. And then, by the way, there are ones who are so unique, like Maria Bamford. I don't even know how to describe. You have to just see her do her thing, because it's all based on her personality. Even Ellen DeGeneres is one. Her delivery is so purely Ellen that if you copied it, people would say, "Oh, you're doing, you're basically doing a tribute show." Oh, this is the other thing I wanted to say. Back in the very olden early days of comedy, and this is bizarre to think about now. So you guys know how with all these comedy specials, people are just burning through material because once you put it out, that's it. And I've heard Bill Burr interviewed about it. I've heard Tom Seguro interviewed about it. He's like, it used to be you do a whole tour of the country, then you release your CD, and basically then you start over. But now it's, so much material and so much content. Before, and by the way, do you guys watch the Amazing Miss Maisel or whatever?
Marvelous Miss Maisel on Amazon. Yeah.
And I also read a book that went over this same period of time. People would do basically covers of famous bits, and it was totally accepted.
Yes, people stole everything all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't stole. It was literally like a band doing a cover song. So at the time, it was Bob Newhart had this famous bit where he does one side of a telephone call and it's to Abraham Lincoln, and that's the bit. And people would do it word for word, maybe in a little bit different style, and people loved it. And that is something that now you couldn't go out now and kind of be Michael Scott and do Chris Rock's whole routine, and people would be okay with that. I have heard people make comments if a comedian at Helium was doing something that they recognize from Netflix.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're like, no, we want new stuff.
You mean from their own special?
Yeah, from their own material.
I've been to shows where at the end, the people are like, all right, do you want me to play one of my greatest hits? Let me know what the bit. And then they'll say it and they're like, all right, I'll do it for you guys. Like, even though everyone knows it, sometimes like at the end, they're like, all right, I'm done a little early. Does anyone want to hear any one of the big ones? And then they'll get into it. But yeah, once you hear it, I mean, the whole point of comedy is being sort of off balance and surprised with what they're going to say. It's not as funny hearing it over and over again.
I guess, were you guys old enough? Boy, I date myself every podcast, and I swear the next time I'm not going to. Were you guys old enough to remember? So the Steve Martin, King Tut era, people would say the bits with him, like the whole stadium would say that, and people loved it. And it was the same. It was like a show. It was a show, right? It was the same show that people heard, on his famous record. And he actually got sick of it. That's why he retired from stand-up. He didn't like that's what it was like. It's so different now, but that's shocking to hear now that people would go and beg one of these modern day comedians, like, hey, do that, like you said, Joe, your greatest hit, and we're going to do it with you, or like a call and response. It's just, things have changed so much. People are so demanding on content.
It's got to be super hard, right? Like, and you got to be very fast, right? I think everything that's like the way social media has made everything. Speed is like so much of like the thing, because if you don't get there on a topical thing, somebody else is going to get there first. It's going to go viral, and then like let's say the UAB joke happened like today, you couldn't do that because if it went viral, like. You just couldn't talk about it, right? Like your routine would then be reduced to talking about the joke that went viral.
It's an interesting way to think about it. Well, we could go, obviously, especially with these two guests on the podcast. Well, Joe's not a guest. Joe, you're here all the time. But with Aneesh, we could talk on. And in fact, teaser and I hope he comes back for the IP of memes. I think that's really a whole episode on its own, and we'll go through all the famous ones and kind of where they came from and the copyright issues and the IP issues with memes. But Aneesh, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like this. I think this is one of the things we had a stand-up comedy place right next to me when I moved out here, and it went away. And like I just like talking with you guys. I feel like if there was like a nice outdoor comedy show, I would go to it right now. I miss it so much.
Joe, any last thoughts? Now I'm nostalgic for our times, at Helium in the dark, smoky basement.
I got to go on Netflix and Amazon, see if there's any stand-up specials I haven't seen lately tonight. But it's a great form of entertainment. And if you haven't been burning through stand-up on Netflix over the past 18 or so months, I highly recommend it.
All right. And with that, thanks again, Aneesh, our first guest. We'll never forget it. Thank you, Joe. And for all of us here at IP Goes Pop, times are tough sometimes, so keep laughing. We will see you on the next episode.
The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Volpe Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com.